They say New York smells like ambition and burnt coffee. To me, that night it smelled like power. Cologne, champagne, and arrogance swirling under those chandelier lights. I remember standing outside the Manhattan Trust Building, straightening. The same navy suit I'd worn to every business meeting since I could afford one. It wasn't fancy, but it fit right, and that was enough. My palms were slick. I wasn't nervous about money. I was nervous about the looks. That quiet, judging kind of look you get when folks think you wandered into the wrong story. Inside, the Gala looked like a movie scene. Strings playing, laughter echoing off marble floors, and rows of faces that all seemed to already know each other. I walked in alone, clutching my invite like it was armor. The doorman glanced at the card, then at me. A half-beat of hesitation. "Enjoy your evening, sir." The sir felt forced, like he was still trying to process the mismatch between the name and the face. I smiled anyway. Grandma always said, "Don't give anybody the satisfaction of seeing you flinch." At the bar, a cluster of guys in tuxedos were talking hedge funds and Hamptons weekends. I ordered a ginger ale. I had a long night ahead. One of them, tall, slick hair, watch so bright it could blind you, glanced over. "You with the catering team?" he asked, smirking. I laughed once, slow. "Nah, I'm here for the business, not the buffet." He blinked, surprised I'd answered. His buddy leaned in, trying to smooth it over with that fake friendly tone. "Don't mind him. He just likes to joke around." "Yeah," I said, sipping my drink. "Some jokes age like milk." That shut them up. For a second, they turned back to their circle, whispering, chuckling. I could feel it. That low-key dismissal, the kind that stings worse than words. But I'd been through worse. I'd worked construction, flipped beat-down duplexes, negotiated with banks that laughed me off the first time and begged for meetings. The second. I wasn't about to let a room full of overpriced suits ruin my stride. Still, something in me tightened. Every grin, every nod from across the room felt measured. I found a quiet spot near the balcony, staring out over the city lights. Down there was the grind, the endless noise that raised me. Up here, it was all polished glass and fake smiles. That's when I saw him. Lawrence Beckman, big-time developer, the kind of guy whose signature could change a whole block overnight. He was surrounded by people laughing too loud, drinking too much. I'd studied his portfolio for months. Owning one property under his umbrella would put my company on the map. So I waited until the crowd around him loosened, then walked over, confident but not cocky. "Mr. Beckman, I'm Marcus Hale. Been following your work since the Riverside project. I'd love to talk about a potential partnership." He looked me over once, shoes to tie, then forced a smile. "Ah, you're with which firm?" "I run Hale Holdings," I said. "Independent, small-scale residential conversions mostly, but I'm expanding into commercial." His smile thinned. "Well, that's ambitious." Then he turned to refill his glass. Conversation over. I stood there a beat longer than I should have until one of his friends chuckled and said, "Don't take it personal, kid. Everyone's ambitious here." I smiled again, that same calm grin I'd practiced my whole life. "Yeah, some of us just mean it." Walking away, I could feel their eyes on my back. Part embarrassment, part fire. I wanted to prove them wrong, so bad it tasted metallic. Half an hour later, they started the silent auction. Art, cars, dinner packages, stuff I had no business bidding on. But when the announcer said, "Up next, a fractional stake in the very building you're standing in," something in me snapped awake. That property had been on my radar for months, one of Beckman's crown jewels. The crowd buzzed. Bidding started at $500,000. I didn't even lift my paddle. I couldn't. My entire net worth, liquid, was barely a fraction of that. But I stared at that number on the screen like it was calling me out. That was the moment right there. The humiliation, the hunger, the vision, it all fused into one vow. Next time I walk into this building, it's going to have my name on the deed. On my way out, one of the tuxedo guys from earlier stopped me near the coat check. "Hey, man," he said with that smirk again. "You should have bid. Maybe you'd own a piece of history." I held his stare. "Yeah," I said. "Give it a year." He laughed like he thought I was joking. I didn't. Outside, the night was cold enough to bite, and the city lights blurred through a thin fog. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed, "Buy this building." 1 year, then I saved it as my lock screen wallpaper. Every time I checked the time, I'd see that promise staring back at me. When I got back to my apartment in Brooklyn, I didn't sleep. I poured a cup of coffee and opened every spreadsheet, every deal I'd shelved as someday. If that. Gala had been their playground. I was about to turn it into my battlefield. First, I sold 2 underperforming properties. Painful, but necessary. Then, I hit the phone, calling every investor who'd ever half believed in me. I pitched new projects. With teeth, short-term flips with guaranteed returns. Some said no. Most didn't answer. A few said yes. That was enough. By month 3, I had momentum. By month 6, leverage. By month 9, people who used to ignore my calls were calling me. Funny how that works, and yeah, if you're still watching, this story right now, don't forget. The world's full of people who'll doubt you just because they can. Hit that like button if you've ever felt underestimated. It tells the algorithm what we already know. You're not backing down either. Because trust me, the moment they laugh at you, that's when the clock starts ticking. When I tell people that year almost broke me, they think I'm exaggerating. Truth, I aged 10 years and 12 months. Every morning I woke up before sunrise, made a pot of the cheapest coffee on the shelf, and stared at that lock screen. Buy this building. The words hit harder than caffeine. By 6 a.m., I was already knee-deep in phone calls, zoning maps, and spreadsheets that looked like alphabet soup. I learned quick that business isn't about luck, it's about leverage. So I flipped anything I could touch: duplexes, laundromats, even a busted-down strip mall in Jersey that smelled like regret and old fries. Each deal fed the next, and when the banks wouldn't listen, I found private lenders who did. People, hungry for returns but smart enough to know I delivered. Still, there were days when everything went sideways. I'd lose a bid by a few $1,000s, or a tenant would bail right before closing. I'd sit in my car outside some courthouse auction, fists clenched, thinking maybe those guys at the Gala were right. Maybe I'd never break into their world. Then Grandma's voice would echo in my head. "Baby, they can't own what's inside your mind." So I'd take a breath, turn the key, and get back to work. By midsummer, I was running on fumes and adrenaline. My phone never stopped buzzing. Investors wanted updates, contractors needed checks, and my accountant kept reminding me that my tax situation looked like a Jackson Pollock painting. But I didn't care, because every night when the city went quiet, I'd pull up that same building's listing, the one from the Gala, and check the ownership records. Still Beckman's name on it. For now. Around August, I got my first real break. A broker friend called. "Marcus, there's a small office tower up in Midtown going for cheap. Needs rehab, but it's zoned commercial." Cheap meant haunted, and half empty, but I went anyway. The place smelled like dust and bad decisions, but standing in that cracked marble lobby I saw it, the bones. I scraped together every penny, partnered with a silent investor, and made the move. We gutted that building like it owed us money. 6 months later, we sold it for double. Just like that, my company wasn't the underdog anymore. People started calling me Sir. Even Beckman's office sent a casual invite to one of his developer luncheons. I didn't go. Not yet. By fall, the market slowed. Prices dipped. That's when I smelled opportunity. I started tracking the trust building, the same one, where they'd laughed at me. Turns out Beckman's group was quietly struggling. Bad loans, overspending, too many champagne nights. Rumors floated around the circles I'd finally worked my way into. I called my attorney. "Get me everything you can on that property's debt." She laughed. "Marcus, are you serious?" Dead serious. 2 weeks later, the report landed in my inbox. I sat there in my office at 2 a.m., reading every line. Mortgages stacked on mortgages, payments late, partners bailing. That building was bleeding cash, and suddenly the dream didn't look impossible anymore. It looked inevitable. Still, I had to move quiet. If they caught wind that I was circling, they'd either jack up the price or lock me out. So I built shell LLCs, one for each investor I trusted. I funneled offers through proxies, made it look like just another portfolio shuffle. By winter, the numbers lined up. All that flipping, all that grind, it gave me exactly what I needed. Leverage. The kind that lets you make one phone call and change your whole life. I remember sitting in a diner on 9th Avenue, snow falling outside, when my broker called. "Marcus," he said, "they're entertaining offers. You in?" My heart was doing backflips. "Send the contract." He paused. "You sure you want to go all in?" "Yeah," I said, "all in." I signed the paperwork right there, next to a cold plate of pancakes and a refill of burnt coffee. Didn't even taste it. I just stared at the signature line, my hand shaking, thinking about every insult, every rejection, every door that had closed in my face. When I hit send, it felt like a thunderclap. All the noise, the hustle, the doubt, it went silent. For a second, I swear I heard Grandma's voice whisper, "Told you, baby." A month later, it was official. The Trust Building, 30 stories of glass and marble, belonged to Hale Holdings. My name, my blood, my grind. I didn't post it on social, didn't brag. I kept my head down, planning the next step. Because the story wasn't complete yet. Not until I walked back into that same ballroom and let the truth speak for itself. So, yeah, if you're still here listening, hit that subscribe button right now. Not because of me, but because you've got your own trust building out there, something they said you couldn't touch. Let this be your reminder. The grind pays, but only if you stay long enough for the tables to turn. And trust me, they will turn. Just wait till you hear what happens when I went back to that gala. They sent the invitation in a gold envelope this time. Same event, same ballroom, same fancy calligraphy that screamed exclusive. I held it for a long moment, before opening it, just letting the weight of it sit in my hand. The year before, I'd walked into that building as an outsider. Now, I owned the building they were renting for their gala. Life's got a sense of humor, doesn't it? I didn't RSVP right away. Part of me wanted to forget that night ever happened. But another part, the part that had watched those men, smirk like my dreams were a punchline, knew this was the circle closing itself. Not revenge, just balance. So, yeah, I went. When the car pulled up to the marble steps, I sat for a second, looking up at the glass doors. This time, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't the guy trying to prove he belonged. I was the guy who'd already earned it. Inside, everything was just how I remembered it. The smell of champagne, the same string quartet, the same kind of crowd pretending to laugh at the same tired jokes, and, I'll be honest, it almost felt like déjà vu, except this time, the air felt different. Because when I handed my invitation to the doorman, he didn't hesitate. He straightened up, smiled, and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Hale." That Mr. hit different. I walked in slow, taking it all in. Some faces looked familiar, but they didn't recognize me right away. The same group from last year was near. The bar, different tuxes, same arrogance. I heard one of them laugh, that same sharp laugh that had burned in my memory. I smiled to myself, not out of bitterness, but gratitude. Without that night, none of this would have happened. I made my way toward the host, Beckman, still commanding the room like a politician, shaking hands, tossing out compliments that felt mass-produced. When he saw me, there was a flicker of confusion, then a polite smile. "Good evening. I don't believe we've met." "Marcus Hale," I said, shaking his hand firmly. Something about the name made his eyes narrow. "Hale? Hale Holdings?" "That's right," I said. "We finalized a deal recently that involved this building." His glass paused halfway to his lips. "I wasn't aware—" "You probably wouldn't be," I said, keeping my tone easy. "It went through a few LLCs before the ink dried." His expression froze, that moment when pride meets reality. I didn't say another word, just smiled. And man, that silence said everything. Word travels fast at those events. In under 10 minutes, whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? The guy who bought the trust building is here." People started glancing my way, trying to remember if they'd ever spoken to me, if maybe they'd underestimated the wrong man. I didn't gloat, didn't grandstand. I just stood by the balcony sipping water, letting the noise swirl around me. Beckman approached again later, this time with a softer look. "Well, Marcus, congratulations. I must admit, you've certainly made a name for yourself." I nodded. "Appreciate that." He hesitated, then asked, "So, what's next for you?" I looked around the ballroom, the chandeliers, the polished floors. "Next," I said, "I think I'll start fixing a few cracks in the foundation." He chuckled, not sure if I was talking about the building or something else. I left him, wondering. As the night wound down, a few people came up, shaking my hand, telling me they'd always seen potential. Funny how hindsight brings clarity. But I didn't hold it against them. I wasn't there to rub it in. I was there to stand tall in the same room that once tried to shrink me, to prove to myself that I'd never needed their permission to belong. When the band played the last song, I stepped out onto the same balcony I'd stood on a year earlier. The city stretched beneath me, alive and glittering. Last year, I'd looked out there and seen a battlefield. Now, I saw a skyline full of possibilities. And if you've stayed with me this far, take this moment as your sign. Don't waste time arguing with people who can't see your worth. Just keep building quietly until they have no choice but to see the proof. If this story hits home, hit that like button for everyone who's ever been underestimated. Subscribe if you're still out there grinding for your own comeback story, because I promise you, there's a version of this moment waiting for you too, the one where you walk back into the room that once made you small and realize you've outgrown every inch of it. That night, after the gala, I didn't go to any after parties, didn't celebrate, didn't post a single thing online. I just rode home with the windows down, letting the city breeze roll over me. New York at night. It has a heartbeat. You can hear the dreams in it, the ones still fighting, the ones already lost, and the few that made it out alive. And somewhere in between all that noise, I heard mine. When I got home, I poured a glass of whiskey, sat on the balcony, and watched the skyline, the same one I used to stare at from my old apartment in Brooklyn, wondering if I'd ever make it across that invisible line between them and me. Now, I was on the other side. But the truth, it didn't feel like victory. It felt quiet. I thought about that night a year ago. The humiliation, the laughter, the way I had to swallow my pride and smile through it. That pain was gasoline. It burned hot enough to push me through sleepless nights, bad deals, and boardrooms where I was still the only one who looked like me. But sitting there, with the city glowing beneath me, I realized something. Success isn't payback. It's proof. Proof that I was never crazy for believing in myself when nobody else did. Proof that no system, no stereotype, no smirk could define my ceiling. When I walked into that gala tonight, I didn't just walk in as Marcus Hale, the investor. I walked in carrying every kid who grew up hearing People like us don't make it there. I carried the weight of every door slammed in my face, and every ancestor who dreamed that one day someone who looked like me would own the building instead of cleaning it. And you know what? That hit harder than any check I've ever cashed. Because wealth fades. Power shifts. But dignity, that's something they can't buy or break. I remember calling my mom the next morning. She picked up and said, "So, you showed them?" And I laughed, said, "Nah, Ma, I showed myself." She went quiet for a second, then said, "That's what your daddy used to say. The goal ain't to be seen, it's to be solid." And, man, that line stuck with me. That's the thing about success. It looks loud on the outside. The cars, the suits, the big moves. But when you really live it, it's quieter than people think. It's peace. It's the moment you stop needing validation from rooms that never respected you to begin with. It's walking away from ego and walking into purpose. So, yeah, I bought the building. But the real win was knowing I didn't need to hurt anyone, to heal myself. If you're still listening, I want you to remember this. Every laugh, every rejection, every locked door, it's part of your blueprint. They laughed at me once. Now I build the foundations they stand on. And you watching this, you've got your own building to buy, your own table to sit at, your own moment where the world finally sees what you've been saying all along. So, don't quit. Don't shrink. Don't give up your seat before the music stops. And if this story hit something in your chest, hit that like button for every dreamer who's been doubted. Subscribe if you're building your own legacy brick by brick. Because I'm telling you, it's coming. That moment where you look around and realize you didn't just make it, you became it.